Let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessie Jim, and I am the NAPS Project Field Coordinator. I would like to thank Darrell for setting aside time to provide your presentation this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter this evening, presenting, like I said earlier, on greenhouse management, the Diné College Land Grant Office Extension Agent, Darrell Yazzie. So go ahead, Darrell. The floor is yours. The screen is yours. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here.
Hello, everyone. Shea Darrell Yazzie Jr. Chia. Twitter in and Nishla Totone Bashichin Hashkahanzone Edashiado Kinyani Deshnale. I'm from Klagato area community. I'm the extension agent with the Diné Land Grant Office. And I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of farmers and ranchers throughout the years as I've been an extension agent. And so this is collective knowledge of workshops and just personal knowledge from growing in a greenhouse or of a greenhouse structure. So today we'll be learning about the differences between some structures similar to a greenhouse. So I'd just like to go right into it, and feel free to ask any questions in the comments or let us know. For what to know of how to in the greenhouse growing type of space, as I think one of the important ones is if you're looking into one, what is your goal to reach? Are you looking for a season extender or all year growing? If that's kind of in your goal outlooks, then great. I think this is something that would be beneficial for you, and the structure alone will be pretty worth it time-wise. Who is your team? It is a full-time management type of setting, and it's kind of a daily thing that needs to be occupied and also managed. So it's just not like a few times out of the week, especially if you're in regions where temperature gets pretty high, or you have fluctuations of climate throughout the whole year. So it just really depends on what you want to do and how you're set up in your region or the area that you chose for the setup of the greenhouse. Do you have additional funding? Costs is depending on your area of resources. Every store, every location will have a variation of cost differences, and then it goes all down to the type of material that you're going to be searching for, buying, and if that's coming out of pocket, then I guess like the more pricey and more valuable and reliable type of material is going to be costly. But if you have funding from a grant or anything that's pertaining to a grant, I think that's the best way to go, because it can get pretty pricey. What is your soul? What is your soil and climate like year round? I think that's one of the main components about greenhouses is that it's gonna be an ever churning, ever type of management, well, not just like the hoop house, but also the soil, because you're gonna be growing in a small amount of space in a short amount or a long periods amount of time. And so if you ever think about that, the amount of nutrients and uptake of minerals and vitamins that is in the soil or nutrients is going to be taken up in a short amount of time, depending on the type of plant that you're growing, of course. So I think a lot of research needs to go down into that as well. So not just what you're growing, but also when you're growing it and the type of environment that it needs to be in. And I don't think I need to repeat this to a lot of people, but I just for the ones that don't know, I get there's a difference between cool season, warm season type of crops. So doing your research on that well will help you in determining what type of plants you can grow in a hoop house or greenhouse setting. Um, where is your water source? Is it connected or are you hauling water? Because I think that's one of the main components about greenhouses. Although it's very beneficial for you to be growing in a small compacted space, water usage is gonna more or less gonna be more. Um, depending on, like I said, the type of plant you have, the type of soil you have, and also the amount of time management that you're going to be going throughout the whole thing. And it can get really technical, or as far as like using different mechanisms of like computerized water scheduling, or if you're doing it by hand. So it's just, and that's going to change throughout the year, of course, because small plants don't take up as much as water that it needs, as opposed to like a full grown 8 feet type of uh, um, plant that's going to be uptaking it more on a daily basis. And then what type of crop will you be growing? So like I said, it's just going to all vary down to that. And of course, there's going to be really water tolerant, water drought type of plants, or there's going to be some that are just going to be thirsty every day, and so you get the water on the daily. And that's going to change throughout the season too, as at the beginning of the season, it's going to be warmer, kind of cooler, so you don't have to use as much water. But also at that time stage, the plant is going to be developing, and as it's growing, the leaves are going to get bigger, the stems are going to be broader, thicker. So all that usage of water uptake and water transpiration through the leaves and everything is going to be increasing as it gets hotter and warmer in the season, and then dropping back down again. What that looks like for your operation, if you have buyers or sellers, or if you're just doing it for home consumption or local consumption. So it's just depending on what you're growing, how you're growing it, and what your time management is going to be looking like throughout the year. And then going forth from there, I guess hopefully this little presentation is going to give you an insight into if a greenhouse or hoop house is going to be worth it. And I'll be explaining the differences between the two terminologies, because there is a difference. And I think that a lot of people kind of throw around the words uh, so loosely, because I guess there's no knowledge into the differences of the two words. So going on from there, greenhouse versus hoop house. I think those are both two different letter words, but I kind of just put them into one to save space. Anyways, as you can see on the left side, this is going to be greenhouse, and this is more or less what a hoop house is going to look like. For those participating in, would you like to tell me, or what do you see? What differences? Anyone? Just maybe a quick.
What was that?
Oh, what you notice between the two. What's the differences? Key differences.
The one on the left, it's more, it's updated, versus the right is not so not so nice as like.
Yeah. So there's a chat section. Benita said there's ventilation and irrigation. Assuming she's talking about the left side. Yes. So if you see like the components and everything on the left side is more complex, and there's a lot more added to it, because generally a greenhouse is more climatized, and so there's more like instruments, there's more mechanisms included to help regulate the temperature throughout the whole day, but not even just the day, like throughout the night and throughout the whole season. And that's going to be dependent on your type of vegetables or plants or flowers or what it may be, on how much space they need, how much water they need, how much sunlight do they need it in a certain temperature. And then a lot of plants like that are really, I guess, if you're going to be choosing a greenhouse, it's going to be for plants that are climate sensitive. So if they need to be at a constant temperature of like 60 degrees when it's like 100 and something outside, then of course your ventilation is going to be going on the double throughout the whole day, and then not so much at night. And so and then as opposed to something that's on the right, to where it's more ground based, I think that's something that I see in the differences as well. if you look on it on the left side, everything's off the ground. It's on the table. It's on some type of shelf. It's going to be more or less not so traditional growing type of growing, as opposed to the right, to where it's all in the ground and they have tarp, they have mulch, they have I guess it's the general type of setting for growing conditions. And I believe here they have more like the bush type of tomatoes, and looks like they have some basil here and some chilies as well. So it's just all based on what your type of growing, what your time management is. Um, so I guess that's just a really brief type of explanation of the difference of the two. And then going on, um, further explanation between the two. So for greenhouses, there's going to be more components involved, as you've seen in a photo. For the hoop house, the foundation, there's a foundation that's going to be there. And that foundation is going to vary, I guess, based on your area. If you have really sandy soil, you want a really, set concrete type of foundation perimeter. And then you're going to have the ribs. Is this kind of an, I guess, terminology that um, hoop housers or greenhouse type of people who describe the basic foundation, kind of like the ribs, as you've seen on the other photo. You can see like a generalized rib of an arch on each of them. So that's what they call ribs. And then the stabilization is not going to be so sturdy. The cover is going to be just kind of a one layer type of thing. For greenhouses, it's going to be more stable, concrete from top to bottom. The hoop house can be semi-stable. That's dependent on how you set it up from the beginning and then going through it. Greenhouses have usually a double layer, maybe even triple of wall layer, and that dependent on the type of material that is used. Hoop houses are normally just single layered type of plastic that are UV reflective on the outsides, and then on the inside, I guess it's just meant for a type of fabric that allows heat in and a little bit of heat escaping, but also a lot of the light is going to be captured in as well. And then the greenhouse is going to have a ventilation system. Like I said, in the summertime, that ventilation system is going to be almost non-stop, especially in regions like in Phoenix or lower elevation type of settings, where the sun is just so hot that it heats up the ground and it radiates throughout the night, and that's where ventilation is needed. For hoop houses, it's going to be dependent on the environment, so it's not going to really it's not going to really be a constant temperature. So during the day, it's going to rise, at night it's going to drop, and then so I guess one way to help controlling the heat of the day for that is just some people have roll up sides, meaning that the side of the walls kind of come up and allow for natural type of ventilation to happen. But that's not really, I guess that doesn't really work throughout the whole year because you have some calm days, you have some windy days, you have some semi-windy days, and then sometimes you get that big old gust of wind out of nowhere. So that's just, like I said, it's going to be dependent on the environment. And then usually greenhouses are built with glass or silicone walls or some type of polyester or type of I guess plastic type of setting walls, but it's more sturdy, and but those type of materials are going to be costly, especially if you're going to want a really big hoop house, or I mean greenhouse. And then for hoop houses, it's just a general, like I said, UV one side plastic, and then sometimes they double that, and it just helps in capturing heat and light, also be more variant. Or sometimes they will have like a mesh type of material that's going to be either white or like a beige or even dark colored type of mesh, and that's just going to be dependent on your type of plants that you're growing inside the hoop house, or how much light the plant needs, because sometimes they don't need that much light, some of them need a lot of light. So That's where the color of the mesh is going to come in. So the darker is going to absorb more heat, but it's going to reflect a lot of light. And the white is going to kind of absorb um, more of the light and reflect some of the light. And so it's going to be more half and half. And then like the beige is going to be kind of like in between. Um, so that's just, I guess, some information that you would need to do more research on, dependent on your type of plants that you're growing and the type of season you're in. Excuse me. So temperature regulated for the greenhouses, like I said, if you have flowers or type of plants that are really temperature sensitive, they can't go like 5 degrees up above like 75 degrees, or they can't go 5 degrees lower than 55, and so they need to be generalized in that average of like 65 to 70 type of temperature range, and so that's where fans and cooling systems will be installed to help regulate the heat throughout the day. And then, in the wintertime, they'll have heaters installed. So that way the temperature inside the greenhouse will be regulated at a constant temperature. Um, and that's where the double walls and double layers can help in reducing the amount of heat loss or absorption of cold is going to be effective. And then for your hoop houses, the temperature is not so regulated. Like I said, it's going to be hot during the day, it's going to be cold at night, and then in the wintertime, or like changing season of cool from hot to cool weather, inside the hoop house will be the same. And that's where I think a lot of people kind of they have systems built inside the hoop house as well. So you can even do like a mini hoop house in on your rows, or even they call these wall of waters. Could have I should have did some pictures of those, but I didn't include any. But they're called wall of waters, basically walls of water in a column, and there's this plastic layer on both sides, and so it's one column of plastic layer, and in between is like water, and it's surrounding the plant and helping it absorb heat, and then slowly releasing at night. So that's how some people also help in season extension in the hoop house. Or you can use agrifabs too. That's also another option. So you can do a double layer or triple, or even do a fourth layer on that with mulch and everything. So you can get really creative with that. And then going on from that, there's the heating cooling system, like I said, for the greenhouse, cooling, heating as day and night change for the hoop house, consistent control, not so variant control for the hoop house, sanitary protocols, and I think that's a really I wouldn't say big one, but I feel like a lot of greenhouses kind of have a protocol for entering and exiting, because you don't want to be introducing any type of pathogens or any type of bacteria or any type of seeds with you when you're coming from the outside and going in. So sometimes they'll have this section before the you walk into the actual greenhouse of cleaning yourself or switching your shoes to something that's more rubbery and can be sanitized more easily when you walk in. And then so I guess that's just dependent on your operation. And then for protocols for that operation, it just depends on your hoop house and the plants that you have in it and the type of management that you want to instill in it. So I believe for hoop houses, it's just more free will kind of thing. But like I said, it's just dependent on how you want to run your operation for that. Longer time setup for greenhouses, because like I said, it's going to be more stable. There's going to be more components with it. There's going to be a lot of heavy type of machinery included. And there's going to be a lot of like labor intensive type of setup for greenhouses. And it's going to take some time for that to set up, dependent on your resources, if they're all there, if you have enough help, if you have all the right tools. And so I think that's why it's longer setup time for that. And then for hoop houses, it's going to be shorter setup time. You can even do it within like 2 weeks. Like I was part of one not too long ago at Red Valley High School. There's a hoop house set up there, and we did that whole thing in 2 weeks. Anyways, so yeah, And then costly is going to be very costly for a greenhouse. So I believe unless you have that type of money, then most of this is going to be more grant funded. And then same for the hoop house. It can become costly dependent on the materials that you choose and where your resources are. Sometimes you need to outsource because you don't have anything close by, and then traveling, expenses and so forth, and then labor expenses and all that. So it can become costly. So I believe that if you were to put up a hoop house, it would be better to get help with that rather than doing it on your own. I don't believe it's a one person type of thing. You could, but it would probably take you all year. So yeah. And then moving on from that, what are greenhouses or hoop houses used for? Um, Generally, both offer a season extension type of setting, like I said earlier, and a definition of season extension in agriculture is season extension is any method that allows the crop to be grown and or harvested beyond its normal outdoor growing season and harvesting time frame or the extra time thus achieved. So a lot of times, I believe greenhouses are meant for regions where it's colder, but they don't have enough growing season. So hoop house or greenhouses are a great benefit for that type of region, and they offer that more type of growing throughout the whole season. And then let me see. What is and then I think you can also find out more information on if a hoop house or greenhouse is worth it is dependent on what is your growing season in days. And what I mean by that is like what is when is your first and last frost dates in your zone area. And if you ever look up this online, I believe that all those estimations are not guaranteed. So I wouldn't rely on them fully. I would maybe go a week before the last frost date and then a week after the first frost date, and then taking precautions like buying agrifabs or other type of material that you want to use and protecting your plant against frosts. And so I think that's one of the main leading components when you're growing outdoors in the big fields and everything is looking at those dates and time dates of first and last frost dates. So that's kind of and then I guess the days within between those two dates is kind of gonna give you the estimated growing season. And so and that can go back into the type of plants that you're going to be growing. How long of a germination time period is that seed that you planted is going to become like a little sprout, and then from there how long from that little sprout to the official flower stage is that going to be, and then from there how long after is it going to produce like a fruit or vegetable on it, and then by the end of that, when it's going to be harvested. So from when you plant it into the ground to get the germination started, all the way out to when you actually pick the ripe or consistent type of fruit or vegetable, is going to give you the how many days you will need within the growing season. And that's why I think that information is really crucial, especially if you're going to be growing outdoors. But it's going to be something that can save you time and money when you're looking into resources of where you can buy seeds and where it's coming from, and how much seeds you'll need throughout the whole year. And for seeds, I believe it's better to buy it in bulk. And then a lot of times, depending on your seed source, they'll have like some information along with it, like how much, what percentage of the seeds and overall is going to be uh, will be able to germinate, because sometimes they'll have like a low germination rate or sometimes they'll have higher. So it can get really nitpicky and scientific as far as that goes. But generally, this is the information that you would need beforehand on determining that. And I kind of just looked up my area, but there's really no resources on it. So the closest place that I found to Ganado was just kind of generalized. I believe this is last year's. So the first fall frost is going to be on October 22nd. And so that's, I guess when the first frost comes. And then in the springtime, June 9th would kind of be the last frost. So initially, I guess with season extenders, you can actually um, start growing, I guess, 2 months before this actually first frost date of the season. Or maybe even just start your seeds indoor and then transition them out into your field, maybe after this date. So that's something that you could use greenhouses for as well. What are greenhouses or hoop houses used for? Continued, normally set up with an east to west entrance for south facing walls. And what I mean by that is, let's say your rising sun comes from the, I guess, east side, so that whichever door you want that side to be, either the front or back, I don't think it really matters. I guess just the ends of the hoop house or greenhouse are going to be facing from east to west, so that way during the whole day and everything, the south and the north walls will be facing towards the sun, um, lengthwise of duration throughout the day. And so during that whole time, it's going to be absorbing heat, it's going to be absorbing light, it's going to be kind of feeding that the environment inside the hoop house for you, for the plants that you're going to be growing. So like here, for this number one up here, you can see the sunlight enters the greenhouse. Two, sunlight is absorbed by plants in the greenhouse itself. And then longer wavelengths radiate through the glass or plastic into the atmosphere. And then the third part of the process is the process converts light to heat, which is contained in the greenhouse. And so that's why I'm saying, like, during the summer times, I think it's adequate and crucial for you to have a ventilation component to any type of enclosed greenhouse or hoop house type of structure, because during the summer it just gets way too hot in there. But of course that's dependent on the type of plants that you have. Cactus really love that. Drought tolerant type of plants love that. But if you have something that's really leafy or really broad leaf, they'll lose a lot of water throughout their day because of the evapotranspiration that they go through. So taking up water from the roots and then into the stems and then releasing it into the leaves as they go throughout the gas exchange of carbon monoxide to oxygen and so forth. And so that's why I'm saying that during the day, during the summer times, it's good to have a ventilation going through, or if you have the roll-up side capability, then put those up. But like I said, this is kind of a whole full-time management type of thing that you're gonna have to instill into yourself, but also your helpers, because that's gonna, I guess, rolling up the sides wouldn't be adequate if you're on a windy day, and I'll go through why in a bit. And then if you have a lot of sun, or I mean rain even, then that's gonna kind of play an actual role into absorbing the heat and stuff like that. So hopefully that, I guess, answers that. Normally, why it's set up from east to west entrances. And then what are greenhouses or hoop houses used for? Continue again. Benefits of growing in a greenhouse or hoop house. Consistent growing, like I was saying, if you really know the patterns and the fluctuation of temperature change, then you can use that to your advantage in the greenhouse or hoop house. Plant protection. Sometimes you get hail or some type of strong type of weather that happens, and a lot of times those damage your really delicate type of plants, and sometimes those are going to be the ones that need more protection around. So if you have lettuce or soft type of tissue, fruits or vegetables, then this would offer protection for those as well. Optimum environment conditions, like I was saying, is going to be hot and warming up a little bit sooner in the season, and then it's going to be warm and hot throughout the longer as it's getting into the cool season again. All season gardening. So this is where I think understanding the type of plants of warm season and cool crops type of conditions, you can start growing in them. And so I guess you can basically once you understand those characteristics, and then you're able to link those type of characteristics with the plants that you're growing, then you can actually grow 365 days throughout the whole season. And that's so yeah, it can get really it can be really be beneficial in that way. Free will customization, so you can set up it however you want, but I guess really researching into the different ways people have done it, and then it always comes back down to the type of plants you have, the type of plants you're going to be growing, and then from there you can set it up how you wish. um so and then another thing, plant closely, but also be careful with that, because there are some I guess not so positive outcomes from that too, and I'll explain that in a bit. And then you have food all year round, mostly. So I guess it just depends on your growing patterns in that little space or big space, depending on the length and width of the building structure. And then it saves time. I get well, not necessarily, but it saves time for you to actually be out there hoeing in the ground and everything like that. So, and then also space. You can use more space, use more amount of the space in your little growing area. And I guess this is an example of what a hoop house can look like if you really manage it and if you put the money into it too. Here you can see a nice width and height of a hoop house, and their growing beds are really thick and wood. The structure is pretty sturdy. And then here they also, layered down an agrifab below that because the sand here was really sandy. But and then on top of that, they put gravel. And if you know anything about wood sales, any wood prices currently, they're pretty, high. So anything like this would be pretty costly. And these are actually up like 30 feet or 30 inches high. So it's kind of a high raised bed. And then, you need all that soil to fill in between it. And these were like at a width of 3 feet across too. And so, and then in between all these are they all have layered lasagna bed method type of components under them. And then on top is going to be the plants that they transplanted. And once you have that all set up, it just looks really nice. And then you have your workstation out in the back, and you have your little working desk, and keeping everything organized and as clean as possible, because you don't want any tripping hazards or anything like that. So having a space for your tools and everything like that really saves time and any future possible injuries, I guess. So yeah, this is just an example of that. Um, and then for greenhouses and hoop houses, there's going to be a high condensed moisture levels and heat. And I don't know if you guys know anything about microorganisms and how they work, but those are the two main components that they need to survive and be thriveful in. So for rain, climate, snow, wind, and sunlight are kind of something that I don't believe that we can get away from, but understanding them, like I said, will help benefit you in how you run your operation. So if you, for instance, if you have high wind areas, if you're not careful, ripping of the plastic, damaging of the structures, formation, bending of the poles, or anything like that can happen, and that of course all that costs money for you to put up. So once that starts to happen, there's going to be more money going into it to repair, fix, and the labor and all that stuff, and it's just a headache that you don't want to go through. So doing a lot of research beforehand will really benefit you as far as spending wise goes. And then in the snow, snow time, winter time, preventing any buildup of snow on the sides of your hoop houses or even on top, because if you've ever um, uh, had snow fall on you from a tree or on the roof, you'll know that it has a bit of weight with it, especially if there's a lot at once. And so this is the same thing here. Just like there's going to be pressure against the structure of the hoop house, and then as that melts too, the structure around the hoop house will start to become more unstable because it starts to loosen the soil, and dependent on how your structure or the main frame of it below is set, it'll start to kind of move it out or switch it up. And so you want to make sure that you're on constant, I guess, shoveling duty for that. Um, and I think there's some precautions that you can do throughout the season on preventing that to happen. And then, of course, the changing of seasons is gonna always, or before a rainy day, there's always gonna be a lot of wind, and that's why I was saying, if you know that it's gonna be a windy day or a windy time frame or a storm's coming, it's best to close all of the vents and the doorways and pathways for air to travel, because if you don't, a gust of wind coming into the hoop house will actually explode outward. Like it'll push all the pressure outward, and that's where your plastics will start to tear or implode, or even lift the whole hoop house itself if it's not really grounded down. And so, being very cautious about those type of weather conditions throughout the year is going to save you a lot. Um, and I know it's not very reliable on weather apps and everything, but weather apps are a good way to start. Um, and and then watering schedule, like I said, it's gonna have to be a daily thing, especially if there's high temperatures in your region, and a lot of your plants are gonna be wide in width, or they're just really thin, and so a lot of those type of plants are water dependent. So if you don't have enough water, then it's going to start to wilt. If they wilt for a long period of time, then they can actually damage the cells inside the leaf formation or even the stems. And when they start to come back up, it just kind of tears, or it just bends or breaks, or something happens to the plant, and it's just going to go into a shock stage. And then that's where you start to develop, I guess, bitterness in the plants too. And then if you're going to be eating that or selling that, that's something that a lot of people don't like. They don't like the bitterness that comes from that. Um, Ventilation, like I said, during the heat, have proper ventilation. Pest management, ooh, that's a big one. Although it's very important, like it's very efficient, and having warmer conditions and cooler types of seasons, um, it does uh, provide that space for certain unwanted types of microorganisms or even small organisms, like you can see here. I don't know if anyone recognizes that picture or seen it before or even dealt with it. That's what you call pest infestation, and these are aphids. Aphids, no one really knows how they get there. It just kind of happens, and once it happens, it's hard to kind of control or get rid of. So once you start seeing them, I would recommend to remove the whole leaf if it's just on one leaf or stem or plant and outside of your hoop house, or looking into control methods for aphids. And if you have ants inside or near the hoop house, they will actually help the aphids in spreading in your garden, because if you've ever seen an aphid up close, they will kind of inject into the plant, and they'll start secreting or sucking out the sugars and the nutrients from the plant, but also they're just only looking for the water mostly. And they'll be excreting excess sugars and unwanted fluids out their abdomen, and that's what the ants are looking for. So they'll actually start to help the aphid move from place to place, and they'll actually protect the aphid because they're getting a benefit of the sugar and all that. So basically, they're called ant farmers, and so you don't want that to happen. So anything with aphids, get rid of it. And if you leave them, they'll start to spread onto other plants, and that secretion of the sugar will actually have a waxy coating onto your plants too. And then along with that is going to be moisture. And then in the greenhouse, of course, heat. And that's a great place for fungus or mold to start to develop. And then from there, it'll start to take over the plant, and then it'll actually kill the plant by, suffocating it. And and the mold will spread, and there's going to be a lot of spores, and then you're going to have to get rid of everything in your hoop house in order to eradicate that fungus or mold. So just don't with aphids. If you've ever talked to anyone who actually dealt with aphids, they're gonna tell you their horror stories of it and how much hate they have for it. So um, just look out for those when your planting season comes around. Fungus and mold control, like I said, is going to be more prevalent. There's so many types of fungus and mold that are out there, and they're really temperature orientated. So they need really warm acclimated regions, and they need a lot of moisture, which is basically uh, every hoop house, greenhouse type of setting. So making sure, and I'll explain, on ways to help control this as well. So this is just kind of information FYI type of thing. If you're in the region where wind is common, make sure to note the windy months or days will be throughout the year. Um, and so that way you can be prepared by closing up the openings, the vents, the doors, the windows. If strong wind get inside the structure, it will expand the hoop house from the inside out and push outwards, and then causing unwanted tearing or bends of structure formation. And then wind patterns can be found online, or if you are familiar with the windy times of the year, I think everyone who's lived in a certain region for some time will start to notice those type of patterns, and you'll get to notice them more, especially if you have a green house or hoop house. Um, if you have a general ideal direction of the wind, the building can be placed on the opposite direction, meaning the entrances will be faced away from the main direction of the wind. That way, most of the wind will be hitting the sides of the walls, and that can be a problem too. But it's also going to be preventing any type of strong wind to access on the interior side of the structure. Um, and then um, So yeah, it's going to be least resistance on the wind direction that's coming from it. So placing, if you're in a region where you know a lot of, if you're in a valley or canyon side, or if you have structures of formation of rocks on either side, and a lot of the wind directions is solely from one place, then placing your hoop house at a side angle will help in preventing the amount of wind that comes through during those strong wind seasons. And then any tears can be patched up before more damage is done. So the common type of tape used for greenhouse hoop house is called the film repair tape. And those are only temporary fixtures. If you have any type of tear, it's best to um, start planning to actually get another tarp, or not tarp, plastic covering, because those don't really last long, and when you try to repair them, and it just gets even worse after that. Anyways, windbreakers are recommended to help reduce the wind speed, bursts of wind in all directions, and also to reduce the amount of friction of the plastic and metal contact. If you have ever seen wind and any type of hoop house, you'll start to know that it starts to move back and forth. And so, that causes friction between the metals of the main structure of the hoop house, and the plastic that's covering it. And so that's where friction starts to happen. And if it happens for a good amount of time, for a long period of time, then it's going to start to, cause little micro holes, and then eventually start to become big ones. So any type of wind reducer type of structure can be put up. So for here, I recommended, if you're using trees, to plant them 50 feet away from the walls of the hoop house. So that way, as they start to get bigger and more broader, sometimes they'll lose a branch or two during the windy season, or even rain, or during the cold months. And once it falls, it's not going to be on top of your hoop house or greenhouse, or it's not going to be poking holes into it or anything like that. So that's why it's recommended to plant 50 feet away from your structure. And then um, fencing has been used before. and has been seen um, as an effective way of managing wind too. So, and a lot of times, or I've even seen people use what they have around them. So they just did like what do you call it? T-post, and then they did a box fencing on that T-post. And then even though like the T-post and the box fencing wasn't enough to reduce the wind, they actually used tamarisk that were nearby, and they clip them, the skinny branches that could fit and that could be woven to the box fencing, and they use that as a type of wind reducer on the sides of their hoop house, which was really cost effective but also creative. And like I said, they used what they had around them, so that was really cool to see, and I'm thinking of doing that for my little garden as well. And then and if you're in regions that are rainy or snowy, make sure your soil stays compacted and stable even when it gets wet or soaked. If the soil is easily maneuverable when it gets wet, have a more set concreted foundation when you're looking into the plans of your hoop house or greenhouse. That way, you know that it's not going to really shift, or if there's any type of soil erosion, that it's not going to really affect the whole stability of the greenhouse or structure. Um, or if you're in regions that are really sandy, I think longer type of posts stuck down into the ground to help stabilize the greenhouse will actually help in that too. So I think understanding the type of soil that you will be on will help you in setting a stable foundation for your hoop house greenhouse. Um, Heavy rain or snow can cause weight on the building, like I was explaining earlier. Um, at our office in Lee, we found that of an issue in the section that we have a little small hoop house. During the winter season, the snow would kind of compact onto the roof or the top of the hoop house and then on the sides. And then, when the sun comes back out, it starts to melt it. And then that the melted snow would kind of loosen up the bottoms of the structure. And at the time, we had, I guess, used PVC pipes to help kind of create that arch, and then stick it down into the ground. But as the snow started to loosen up the soils on the side, it started to bow outward, kind of push out the stabilizers and kind of concave the roofing of the hoop house. And so that, and then after that, when I was an intern, then I was told to remove the snow every time it snows. So in the mornings of the winter, I would be out there shoveling the snow away from the hoop house, and then getting the snow off the rooftop and everything like that. And so that took some time and it took some energy. Definitely. So if you're gonna be in a region where it's snowy, it snows a lot, then I would take precautions on looking into ways into reducing the amount of snow that gets on top or on the sides of your hoop house, and then making sure that the soil isn't so doesn't move around when it starts to get moistened or wet. And then allow water runoff to go away from the base of the building structure is another thing. And I think that's where gravel or any type of mulch can be placed around the perimeter of the hoop house would be beneficial in reducing the amount of erosion that happens during that time of, a lot of rain or a lot of snowy days. Um, don't allow the water to sit too long around for long durations to reduce any softening of soil foundation. And then reduce or remove maneuver any potential runoffs of water going towards the greenhouses. So if you have your greenhouse near a hillside, or it's like a potential hazard to have them uh, you know by a roadway where during monsoon season comes around and there's that big old gust of water that just runs off and it starts to cause major erosion. If you know that happens around or near the area of your set hoop house, maybe building berms to help in reducing the amount of compact of water and wall side of meeting, I guess. So I guess overall, reducing the amount of erosion, soil erosion around the perimeter of your hoop house is the key for that. And then what else is there? And then also I've also seen people also put a fence perimeter around their hoop house, especially if they're in an area where livestock kind of roam free, because if cattle start to smell what's inside your hoop house and they can't find any other type of vegetation like that, they'll actually start to burst through or push their way through until they actually get inside. Or even your little rodents, like if you have skunks, let me see what else is there, squirrels, raccoons, mice, stuff like that. So um, knowing those type of things will help you actually build a better structure of your hoop house and preventing those type of unwanted type of situations happening. So that's something to look into as well. Also, and then moving on, pest management in greenhouses setting. So there's, like I was saying, there's aphids, and they can either look green or they can either look black or grayish color. But generally, that's their general shape right there. More bulbous looking, and at the end of the abdomen is this long, I guess, antenna. I don't really know what that is, but that's kind of what they look like. And then spider mites. Spider mites are only common in enclosed type of setting growing conditions, and you'll see these little webs that start to form around um, your plants, leaves and flowers or anything like that, and you'll see these little spots on them start to move around. So they're called spider mites because they're like spiders and they create this web formation, and they're just so tiny and small, and there's a lot of them. And that can help and suffocate, or that can actually reduce the production of your plants too, because they start to suffocate them. They also secrete some type of sugar stuff too, and that'll, like I said, it's gonna be a great place for fungus to start growing. So you don't want that. So if you see any of these type of things, remove them at an early stage before they start to infest your area of growing space. And then you also have the gnats, and these also take away from your plants, and over time can become infestated in your area. And then you have the predators, spiders. Natural predators are spiders for your gnats or any type of small crawling critter. So I always say, keep the spiders in unless they're poisonous, like the black widow, which are, common in greenhouse settings because they just love that warm and wet type of environment too. And then ladybugs will help in reducing the amount of aphids you have, but that's dependent on how much aphid you have and ladybug comparison. And then let's see. And then you have your wasps. Sorry, I had to cough. And then not so beneficial type of insects are going to be, like I was explaining earlier, are going to be your ants. They'll start to farm your aphids, and you don't want that to happen. So those are kind of the three most common type of greenhouse infestations that can happen if you don't control the amount of management for the plants there. And they can ruin your whole operation within a week's time. So really looking out for them once your plants start to develop larger leaves, and making sure you check under them, on the side of them, the flower production and all that stuff. So just be wary about those types of pests that can infestate your little growing space. And then there's also the fungus and mold control, like I was saying, and ways to control those are by controlling the amount of moisture in your area. If you let it kind of set too long without proper ventilation, then all types of plants and insects and animals actually have a particular type of fungus and mold that is set to their type of species, and so it's it's not going to be not I guess not where, but it's going to be when. With that, so don't plant too closely, because if you have closely knitted plants, then that's where moisture starts to accumulate in that small compacted area, and then with that moisture and heat, and so it's just gonna kind of cause an unwanted amount of mold or fungus formations that can actually kill your plant, because they're going to take away from the plant. And also one way in doing that, I've seen people actually remove the lower leaves and stems, not stems, leaves from the plant too, and only allowing space for the new formations of the flower and fruit to form. But once a mature fruit is done, they pick it and then they snip off that little attachment of branch to the main stem, and then they kind of allow more ventilation that way. So that's how they prevent any type of close knit type of planting to happen. Um, and then remove any affected plants or fruits immediately, not and then away from your greenhouse hoop house, because like I said, they actually have spores, are basically little seeds that can be airborne, and they can reinfect the area of your growing space. So moving them out and um, keeping them contained is also another thing too. So if you have anything like this and you're using self-made type of compost too into your little greenhouse growing, don't include the affected plants into your compost, because they can actually spread out again that way. So that's just a note to have on that. um, Organic fungus controls are available, so that's dependent on your resources, if you're willing to pay for that. Sometimes the most effective uses of fungicide or pesticide control is not recommended for um, some types of sales. So dependent on who your buyers and sellers are, it's just best to talk with them and see what they're comfortable with and such, or even just yourself. Um, Mostly just controlling the moisture and ventilation and heat is the key to controlling for fungus and mold type of formations. So, like you can see in these pictures, the top one with the black formation of fungus, that's actually really late. If you allow that fungus to grow to that stage, it actually produces thousands of spores and it's already releasing it. And so when you start to break or move that branch or leaf formation, you're actually helping the fungus spread its little spores and eggs, basically. Um, and then once you start to see this white speckles on leaves and discolorations, that's actually a type of fungus too. And so if you start to see this on a one whole plant, I would suggest just removing the whole thing and getting rid of it immediately. If you start to see the dieback of your vegetables and having mold on them, formations and everything like that, remove that whole stem, watch it. If it starts to spread on its own, remove that whole plant again. So just keeping out for those type of things. They'll always form on top. They'll not necessarily form at the bottom, but there are some that will form at the bottom. So that's just dependent on on I guess what type of mold and fungus you have. And I think looking into more research on what has been done for this specific type of plant that you're growing and the type of molds and fungus to look out for is something to know, especially if you want your operation of growing to be more fluent and constant. So just looking out for those too. Oh, so yeah, I think I covered everything that one must know when they're looking into a greenhouse hoop house type of setting. I don't know if that was enough information. I can go even more further than that, but I think that's going to be a lot of information to kind of instill into yourself. But if there's any comments or questions I can take right now, then that would be great. But if not, if none come to mind at the moment, my information for email is down below. Yazzie Jr. at dinecollege.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. One question as far as prices, I know, with the I guess aluminum frame, what are the price range on your on the greenhouses? I know, with my experience with PVC pipe, it's really inexpensive. You're looking like maybe at 1,200. That's including the garden beds. But as far as a structure, I guess a permanent structure greenhouse, what's your lowest? I know it can get pretty expensive. What's a reasonable price, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Okay. So I don't have any numbers for any type of aluminum or metal types of cost frames, but I think that a lot of it just goes back into who your seller is. Sometimes you're able to strike a price with them, and sometimes they're set. So, and it just all comes back to the width of the hoop house and then the length of it. A lot of the more generalized type of hoop houses are going to be like a 20 by 40 type of setting, or even a 15 by 30. So it just depends on the length and width, and also the material that you're going to be using to cover. And I've been told that it's depending on your area and how you set it up, you're either going to be replacing that plastic every year or every 2 years. But generally, it's not going to last any longer than 2 years. And so I think that's another cost variant that a lot of people don't know about, is that the plastic is going to need to be replaced every year to 2 years. So, and then the amount of, I guess the framework too, can get pretty costly. So some people are looking for lightweight, but also lightweight is not so substantial for areas that you have high winds, or if you have a lot of rain in that region, because rust is also another issue. So I guess really doing research into the type of area that you're going to be growing in and the duration of plants that you're going to be growing in that is another thing to look into. So I'm sorry I don't have an actual number for you for that, but hopefully that
Right.
pre-explanation kind of helps with it.
Okay, no, that's fine. I understand. As far as, ventilation and, if it's just the basic PVC hoop house, I notice a lot of the school gardens, and I'm sure home gardens, I do notice right in the middle, the plants do fine on the ends, but then as far as plants that are located in the middle of the hoop house, they tend to, they burn. Do you have any suggestions for, I guess, for gardeners who have that problem? What can they do, setting up fans maybe, or maybe not just planting in the spring and it goes on into summer? What kind of suggestions do you have for them as far as ventilation?
Yeah. So you can do your low cost fans and kind of set them out in the cycle formation in your hoop houses, depending on how big it is. If you have a really wide area, then you're going to need more fans. But I think having a fan formation going in a general direction will help in circulating the amount of heat that's up there, basically. But also, I would recommend them into looking into shade cloths, or the mesh that I was talking about. If they can find one that can cover their whole thing, their whole hoop house during the summer months, that can actually help in reducing the amount of heat that gets absorbed, and only allows enough for to keep warm, but also reflecting most of it during the summer months. And then so that can cover your plastic layer, or you can just remove your whole plastic layer, dependent on if it can be removed. and then just replacing it with a mesh during the summer months, and then replacing it back again during the winter. Or just looking at plants that are going to be really good in high conditions, because I know chilies do really good in really hot climates. Tomato, some varieties really love that heat. Cucumbers are another one. Let me see what else was there. So it's just depending on, a lot of times I think people will start to try to grow lettuce or spinach type of stuff. But if you've ever looked at those type of plants, they'll be more of in the cool crop type of conditions setting. So I think looking into that too, of the temperature orientation of the seeds that you're buying from, will be another thing. So, and um, yeah, so hopefully the ventilation is the ventilation is a big issue. Not a lot of people have the connectivity for electricity for those as well. So I think looking into solar power type of options is another thing. And I think for ventilation, roll-up sides really do well, but as I've seen in some regions, it just kind of deteriorates over time, and then you start having problems into having your sides ripped and everything, and that's gonna be an issue once winter comes around, stuff like that. So it's just kind of a hit and miss or hit and learn kind of thing with hoop houses. There's really not one type of solution for everything. And I think if you're just going to be growing for a short period amount of time, I think going with smaller hoop houses or structures is going to be more efficient for you to maintain. That way, in the wintertime, it's not so labor intensive, or in the summertime, you don't have to really ventilate it as much because it's in a small space, and the ventilation kind of happens on its own. So hopefully that helps with that.
It does, and thank you. We do have a question in the chat box from Sharon. Thank you, Darrell. Great presentation. Question is, how do you get rid of aphids without chemicals?
Like I was saying, if you know what they start to look like, removing the leaves that were affected, removing the stems. I've even seen people reverse stick a what do you call it, tape on the base and the stems of the plant, so that way when they start to travel back and forth up and down on the plant, they'll kind of get stuck there. And the only thing with that is you're gonna have to really manage that that small little thing every day. So taking off the ones that are stuck on there and then replacing it with another one so that more can get stuck on it. And then I also heard that diatomaceous earth also is another thing. Diatomaceous earth is basically fossilized fossils, I guess, that were turned into almost like ash. And I guess that if you look at them in a microscope, they're kind of like little barbs and spear looking type of minute formations. And so if you know anything about insects, they actually have an exoskeleton, and the way they breathe is these little holes that go in and out of their whole body. And so during that whole time, when they're trying to breathe, the diatomaceous earth start to get trapped up in those little spaces and holes, and after some time it gets clogged, and so basically it suffocates them, but also kind of cuts up their inside almost, micro cuts, I guess. And if enough happens, then the insect can't survive, and it just basically dies. So yeah, that's one way to do it. And then I've seen people do the dish soap with lemon juice and water, kind of like equal parts of each, and spraying that on the plant. but remember that you can only have that on for several hours, and then you have to spray it off with some water. Otherwise, you're not you're also killing the plant over time if you don't wash it off with water afterward, because you start to plug up the stomatas, which are the breathing holes for the plant. So that's another way. Some people use neem oil with water too. So basically, it's just the same idea as suffocating the insects. So you're just clogging up the pores of the breathable areas of the insects, and over time, they just kind of suffocate and die. I know that's I guess, really gruesome way to go, but it works pretty well for some people. But like I said, if you're going to be using anything oil based on your plants with this soap, then make sure that you're going to rinse them off several hours after. And it's best to do it only in the evenings, because during the day, like I said, the plant's going to be going through this whole formation or transformation of molecules and water and air and everything, gas exchange. So you need those pores on the plant to be open. So doing them during the time when the sun sets or is setting is when the plant starts to go into rest, and they don't really need to go through that whole gas and chemical exchange. And so that's the time to do to do your spraying of the plants to control the amount of insects on them. So that's another way that I've heard it done. And then yeah, so hopefully that helps and is let me know if it ever works for you guys.
Okay, no, that does help. And then one last question. You talked about the variety of plants that are able to grow, that's ideal for greenhouse. Do you have a listing of the varieties that are recommended for this area in the greenhouse? I guess in the greenhouse setting, do you have a list readily, available for gardeners to refer to?
Not at the moment. But I think that's something that I can work on eventually. But at this moment, I don't have anything readily available. But if, like I said, it just kind of goes back down to doing a little bit research on the seeds that you're buying from the seller, what conditions those plants or the seeds that came from the plants that they were in before. Basically, if you're buying from a region out in the mountain region, the temperatures and everything there is going to be different from a low desert type of region. And then sometimes your seed sellers will also indicate that it was grown in a greenhouse. And I think that's something to look out for too, because if you're buying seeds from a seed seller that's is labeled, from a greenhouse type of setting, then it's going to do more well in your area of greenhouse or hoop house, rather than something that was, grown outside in a field where it was irrigated with water continuously and all that stuff. So I think that's something to look out for too. If you're going to be buying seeds from a seller online or maybe from word of mouth, just ask them, are these like kind of seeds that are good for growing in a greenhouse condition? So I think that's one of the key ones too. And I know like seed sellers will have that description on the side too. Or if not, just I guess ask them through email or contact them somehow, and then ask if their seeds can be grown in a greenhouse setting.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Darrell. And that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you again, Darrell, for your information. I did learn something new, and I'm sure our viewers have as well. And so thank you again.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll be in contact with you for future presentations. And I look forward to learning more and working with you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Visit our Facebook page. We do have useful USDA information on there. And then we also have gardening, livestock publications, and also some how-to videos on there. We also distribute a monthly newsletter. So if you would like to receive our monthly newsletter, please provide your email address in the survey at the end of the session. If you would like to contact our staff, our email is up there. And don't forget to fill out our survey when you exit. That helps us with future programming. Again, thank you for joining us. Please continue to be safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and continue practicing social distancing. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone, and thank you again. Have a good evening. Okay, the Native American Producers Success Project, or NAPS project in short, is a collaborative effort between Diné Inc., a nonprofit organization, the New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service, and Diné College Land Grant Office. This project is being funded by USDA's Office of Partnership and Public Engagement and the Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. The NAPS project field staff consists of myself, our assistant coordinator, Sharon Sandman, and our technology media coordinator, Jana Johnson. The overall goal of the NAPS project is to increase the profitability and long-term sustainability of Navajo farmers and ranchers. To help us achieve this goal, there are some activities that we are currently providing in 4 key areas, which include improving Navajo farm and ranch operations through a series of workshops focusing on crop-related and livestock-related topics. We are also increasing our Navajo farmers and ranchers' knowledge of and access to available programs and technical assistance provided by USDA, BIA, Navajo Nation, New Mexico Cooperative Extension Service, Diné College Land Grant Office, and other professionals. We are also strengthening the organizational capacity of the Navajo Farmer and Rancher Congress to address the current and future needs of Navajo farmers and ranchers. And last but not least, we are facilitating Navajo farmers and ranchers' use of USDA programs such as NRCS, FSA, and RMA programs. I know that was a mouthful, but we do need to give credit where credit is due.